Hi, and welcome back to Magic ASMR. In today's storytime episode, which is also the last one in the series, this season will end with episode 22, and the next season will be something entirely different. I'm gonna keep it as a surprise for now. But anyway, let's get right into it. I got 7 paranormal or unexplained phenomena to share with you tonight. Because this is the last episode in the series, I decided the story should be a bit longer than usual, just so we can end the season with a bang. So without further ado, let's begin. The first story. We live in a building in New York City that has been here for more than 100 years. There is a surprisingly large pool of rent-controlled tenants, all of whom, for those familiar with the city, are pretty typical Upper West Siders, old, crazy, and they talk too close to your face types. As these people pass, the management company is gut renovating the units and charging a market rate which is easily 6 or 7 times the previously charged rate. I bring this up only to show that there is a very diverse economic/personality population in the building. The person inhabiting our unit prior to us was an older man named John, who had lived here since his early years in the 1940s. I had the chance to see the unit before it was renovated, and it was bizarre to say the least. It obviously hadn't been touched since the 50s and very poorly maintained. The man had 5 different rooms, all of which he had painted a solid color, including the floor. The dining area was floor-to-ceiling fire-track red, the living room was black, and the bedrooms were Pantone yellow. Floor-to-ceiling. According to our neighbors, who are also recent additions to the building, he would blast opera music at 2 a.m. He was in his 90s and his boyfriend was in his 30s, and they were always screaming at each other. And they lived in complete filth. He was well known on our block because mostly he lived there his entire life. So that's a lot of background, but I feel like it gives me a reason for why what's happening is happening right now. After the dust settled from our move into the newly redone apartment, my husband was working late and I was home on the couch. It is positioned in such a way that when sitting on one end, the guest bedroom door is just cut off from your line of sight. I'm with my dog doing a Sudoku when I hear the gentle click of the door closing. My dog's ears perk up and he gives a low growl. He's a schnauzer, so this isn't uncommon for him if he hears any kind of unexpected noise. I get up and see the guest room door has been shut. I go in. All the windows are closed in the apartment. But it's an old building, so I don't think anything of it. I open the door and go back to my puzzle. A few minutes later, the door closes again, but with a bit more intention. The sound spooks me, but only because I wasn't expecting it. I'm genuinely just thinking it's structural. I open the door again and decide to watch it for a bit and see if I can see where the fault is. It stays perfectly still for about 3 or 4 minutes. I turn around to go back to the couch, and I kid you not, that door immediately slams behind me. Now I'm scared. I whip around to open the door, and it is locked. Handle won't budge. It's worth repeating that all these fixtures are brand new, which kind of fits the argument of malfunctions, but also that it shouldn't. My brain couldn't decide. What happened next is harder to explain with just words. When I have told this part of the story to other people, Obviously, I'm able to demonstrate in person. But anyway, I put my ear against the door. It's a cheaper, modern, single-panel door, so it looks nice but doesn't feel hearty. And I immediately hear something knock on the other side, as if it were a quick tap with the backside of the hand using their knuckle. I could hear the precision of the hand, if it makes sense. And the door gave a little vibration. This is when I straight up freaked. Grabbed my dog, decided it was time for his evening walk, and called a friend who wouldn't think I was insane. I got back and closed myself in the bedroom. These kinds of events continue, though. My parents came to stay with us for 1 week, and we woke up the next morning, and my mom said to me at breakfast, "You know you have a ghost, right?" I had not mentioned our experiences to others because literally anyone who stayed with us would be in the spooky room, and I didn't want them to be on the edge. I go totally numb when she says this. I asked her why she thinks that, and her response was, "I saw him. He was sitting in your desk chair. I don't think it's a mean ghost, though. He seemed very old." I couldn't engage in the conversation further. The second story. My grandfather had been in World War II and told us about when himself and few other soldiers had been separated from his unit. And when trying to get to Normandy, they had gone through a clearing in a wooded area, but had to drop when they heard something approaching. They were on their bellies in low grass when they saw 20 or 30 German soldiers running across the clearing, clearly in a state of panic. Then they just froze in mid-step. He said they resembled statues, and that some weren't even touching the ground, and that there was no noise whatsoever. After a few seconds came a loud noise like metal scraping on concrete, and the frozen soldiers started to become blurry to the point at which they vanished without a trace. This has been reported by all the soldiers that were present, and all were called to the War Office in London after their return to the UK. There, they were pressed on what they saw over the period of a few days, and were taken back to the same spot in France shortly after the war had ended. Surprisingly, when they got there were other men sharing the same accommodation who reported similar occurrences in the exact same area. They were all taken to the woods and had to describe where and how the events took place. My granddad had said that the entire area was guarded heavily, and that part of the ground was heavily excavated. The strangest thing of all the others, he said, was that there were hundreds of dogs in the area, just miling around for no apparent reason. They returned to the UK with a gag order ordering them to never speak about any of this. He went back to the same spot in France before he died in 1985 and said that the area has been covered with unmarked warehouses and was guarded by an unusually professional security company. He reckoned they were military. I've tried to find out more about this, but I can't find any records of it, and I do remember one of the guys who he was with that day. He used to come visit sometimes and referred to the place as the Splintered Woods. The third story. Me and two friends go down and rent a boat on Lake Okeechobee in Florida. We get approximately 30-foot pontoon boat that has a cover, although there's no cabin or anything under the main deck. It's winter in South Florida, so it's cool but not cold. Thus we decide to just sleep on the boat instead of setting up a camp. We plan on spending 3 days and 2 nights on the lake. We spend our time drinking, fishing, and playing games. It's sometime on the second night when I just wake up. I'm still drunk from our previous activities, but my senses are on overdrive and I just feel aware of something. I was sleeping towards the back of the boat while my friends are at the front. It's eerily calm with no waves in the water. We are about 250 feet from the shore with land on our port side. I started scanning the tree line looking for something. Nothing on land, so I scanned the water on the port side. Nothing again. So I scanned the water aft of the boat. Nothing. I didn't want to disturb my friends, so I scanned the water on the starboard side. That's when I saw it. A skull floating in the water, with just the eye sockets and part of the nasal cavity sitting there in the water, looking right at me about 50 feet away. An immediate sense of dread took me. It was the most scared I've ever been in my life. Then, an even worse feeling took over. Calmness and the sudden urge to jump in the water. I had the notion that I would be at home and at peace if I just jumped into the water. Before I could act on it, I think one of my friends stirred in their sleep because I heard a beer bottle starting rolling near the front of the boat. This snapped me out of it, and the feeling of dread returned. I yelled at them to get up while I moved to start the engines. One doesn't respond at all, while the other drunkenly tells me to fudge off. I yell again that I'm not joking, and nothing. I'm about to pull the starter on the engine, and I yell again at my friends when I hear something. I freeze and listen closely. A very faint splashing sound that is slowly getting closer. I forget about yelling at my friends and focus on starting the engine. I pull and pull and pull, and nothing. In between the pulls, I hear the splashing getting closer, but I don't dare to look in the direction of the noise. Finally, the engine starts and I punch it out of there. I must have gone 30 miles before I came to a stop to conserve fuel. Until the sun rose and my friends woke up, I spent the rest of the night scanning the waters just in case. I had to make up an excuse to explain to my friends why we were so far away from our previous spot. I wanted to tell them, but I doubt they would believe me. When I got home, I did some research, and apparently Native American tribes possibly used the lake as burial ground. Plus, there are thought to be bodies of many victims of hurricanes throughout the decades laying in the lake. Fishermen have found many human bones over the years. This was over 6 years ago, and I have yet to set foot near any body of water larger than my shower. No lakes, oceans, rivers, water parks, pool, hot tubs, nothing. I don't blame you if you don't believe some random guy on the internet. Many times I try to write it off as my drunk self seeing things. However, I can't write off the feeling of wanting to jump in the water with something, real or not, that struck me with terror just a moment ago. Thinking about that feeling of wanting to go into the water with whatever was out there chills me to this day. The fourth story. 2 years ago in summer, I worked in an open-air mining museum as a tourist guide. Around 80% of the tour is situated underground in an actual 500 years old mine shaft. My boss was showing me around the mine, talking about some interesting facts in history, so I could remember it and pass it on to the visitors. He had also lectured me about safety precautions. The underground part is about 1.5 kilometers long, and the deepest you go is until you reach the second horizon, a term used as a floor in a mine, which is around 100 meters. The whole place is much bigger though. There's 14 horizons in total, and the tunnels connect to the surrounding mines in the area. So in reality, there's hundreds of kilometers of tunnels down there, but they're mostly flooded or buried under rocks. There are 3 telephones underground, each around 500 meters away from another, and they can be used to contact the cashier outside on the surface or other guides that are nearby with their own group. On our way to the third phone, my boss was explaining how I can use it to contact another guide in case anyone gets sick or just wants to get out of the mine. Kids often get scared, and we also have people with claustrophobia, etc. We were passing one of the exhibits, which was an old chest used for storing mining tools, and we walked down the stairs right after. We soon reached the third phone when my boss told me that we would now test it by calling each other. He asked me to walk to the first phone located all the way back to the entrance of the mine and call him. On my way back, I was walking up the same stairs, and about halfway up, I noticed something very strange. The chest was definitely closed when we walked past it 2 minutes ago, but now it was open. My first thought was that the chest was open all this time, and I just hadn't noticed, or that the other guides were pulling a prank on the new guy, which was me, obviously. However, as I was walking toward the chest, it slammed itself shut right in front of me and made a loud noise. I got so scared I ran to the entrance and called my boss on the third phone. I asked him if the chest had been opened before, but he said it's just an exhibit and it had always been closed because there's nothing in it anyways. I explained what happened and he tried to make a joke out of it, but he also sounded a bit nervous. Later, when I told this to my colleagues, one of them said that a similar thing had happened to her before, but she only heard loud bangs as when someone is slamming doors when she was closing the entrance at the end of the day. The fifth story. My parents were one of those couples who legitimately lived spending every moment together. They'd socialize with friends together, work together, all of it. My sisters and I figured out that when one died, the other wouldn't be long after. We were surprised that our mother lasted 1.5 years after our father passed. But during that 1.5 years, things happened that probably kept my mother going for that long. My father always sat in his rocker or recliner. There was a touch lamp beside it. After he passed, the chair would sometimes rock a bit, like someone was getting in it. The lamp would sometimes turn on by itself too. The thing that made my mother most convinced that Dad was still hanging around was that she'd sometimes hear my dad call out, "Honey, fix me a cold drink." This was something that he'd frequently say when he was still around. Our mother wasn't the only one to see or hear these things. My sisters, a niece, and my brother-in-law saw them too. And my dad's dog would wag her tail and look towards his chair when these things occurred. After my mother died, it stopped. Everything. No one heard my dad anymore. The chair was just a chair. The lamp no longer had a mind of its own. It's been 13 years since my dad passed and 11 since my mom. My oldest sister still has his chair. She hopes that it'll move again on its own, even though it never does. The sixth story. So, about 6 months after Katrina, the area where we were looking at moving to had really high house prices because of everyone looking for a house. Many in the area were destroyed or still being repaired. Because of this, we bought a house that came up for sale as soon as it went onto the market. I was about 9 at the time. The house was really strange and a few weird things would happen. Things would randomly fall over. We would get weird feelings around the house. What was strange was the room that I was staying in, which was decorated as a little girl's room before we moved in. But the family didn't have a girl. Anyways, one night I woke up. I always keep a light on when I sleep, so I had a table lamp turned on next to my bedstand. At the foot of my bed, there was a silhouette of a man being cast on my wall by the lamp. We painted the wall beige once we moved into the house, so the shadow was really noticeable on the bare wall. I didn't think much of this and went back to sleep, but once I woke a few hours later, I was so startled that it was hard to ever go to sleep again in the house. We only lived there for a couple of months before we moved out. It wasn't until after we moved out that we found out what happened in the house. A friend of the family that had lived there previously had murdered their daughter in that bedroom. It was the scariest experience I have ever had, and I am so thankful to be out of the house. The seventh story. I was about 20 when some weird stuff started happening in the house we lived in at the time. A lot of stuff happened, but there's a few that actually made me write this. It started kind of subtle. We'd hear footsteps in the hall, which at first I thought someone had broken in somehow through my large window. But when I took my husky to check with me, there was no one. It sounded like someone was running from my room down the hall to my mum's and back. Then I'd constantly wake up in the mornings with fingerprint-sized bruises on my arms and legs. It freaked me out, but I tried not to overthink it. One day I was playing with my cat and he climbed up on the windowsill in front of the stairs, and then he did this thing where he looked right past me and up the stairs, following something with his eyes. Then his eyes froze at the top of the stairs and his pupils dilated in horror. I was terrified, to say the least, when I realized whatever he was standing there was watching us. I was also heavily into Final Fantasy during that time, so I was always in the family room playing. One day I was playing and I was incredibly pissed because I kept dying while battling this boss. And then I heard it. Those steps again. I was home alone and fed up, and I yelled, "Oh my God, shut up!" As soon as I said that, I heard one of my mom's indoor potted plants fall off the step it was on and shatter in the dining room next to the staircase. I looked at my feet and my beagle puppy was asleep. My husky was outside and the cat was napping under the kitchen table. I freaked out again, but tried to keep a level head about it. It could have been a coincidence. A few nights later, I was laying in bed, getting ready to doze off, when I heard something slither. I guess that's the best word I can use to explain the sound it made. It slithered under my bed and quickly to my desk, where it crashed into my printer, and when it crashed, my door slammed shut. I instantly jumped out of bed and ran to my mom's room. I didn't sleep in my room until my cousin came to visit for the summer. While she was there, we didn't hear a thing. No running, no bruises, nothing. We ended up moving houses that summer, and the morning after she left back home, I woke up with bruises on my arms again. I hope you enjoyed these shorter or longer stories of this season. This is where the season ends. Maybe I'll do something like this in the future. I don't know. But this is where the paranormal or scary or unexplained phenomena story time will end. And I wish you a good day or night.